Get out! Go to a nursing home! My son's voice wasn't just loud, it was a shard of ice, sharp and final. The words were still hanging in the frigid air when the heavy oak door slammed. The impact was a physical blow, shuddering through the porch floorboards and up through the thin soles of my slippers. I was left standing there, in nothing but my flannel nightgown, as if I were a piece of discarded furniture. The snow, which had been a gentle dusting during dinner, was now falling with serious intent. Fat, wet flakes swirled in the cone of the porch light, settling on my bare arms and in my hair. The cold was an immediate, shocking presence, seeping through the cotton of my gown, raising goosebumps on my skin. Go to a nursing home. I don't care. I hope you freeze. Those were the last words my son Jacob, the boy I had raised, had sung lullabies to, had cheered for at 100 soccer games, had thrown a graduation party for, shouted before I heard the definitive, metallic click of the deadbolt. It was midnight in February in Minnesota. The temperature was plummeting, already well below 20 degrees. I was locked out of my son's house. Our house, I had foolishly begun to think. I stood there for a full minute, stunned into immobility. My breath plumed in the air, a ghostly testament to my shock. This wasn't a nightmare I would wake from. This was real. The chill was already beginning to bite, a sharp, aching cold that made my fingers tingle and then go numb. I brought my hands to my face, but there was no warmth to be found. A wave of pure, undiluted panic rose in my throat. I stumbled to the door, my slippers crunching on the rapidly accumulating snow, and hammered on the wood with the side of my fist. Jacob, let me in. It's freezing. Silence. The house was a dark, unfeeling monolith. The only sounds were the whisper of the wind and the frantic thudding of my own heart. I pressed my ear to the cold wood. Nothing. Were they already upstairs, in their warm bed, having dismissed me from their thoughts as easily as they had from their home? Or were they standing just on the other side, listening to my pleas, waiting for me to give up? Tears welled in my eyes, but they felt hot and shameful against my freezing skin. Crying felt like a surrender. I was Margaret Wells, 58 years old, a former high school principal who had commanded classrooms of hormonal teenagers for 3 decades. I had navigated school board politics, budget cuts, and angry parents. And here I was, utterly defeated by my own flesh and blood. The cold was becoming unbearable. My feet, clad only in damp terry cloth, were blocks of ice. My teeth began to chatter uncontrollably. I looked toward the detached garage, a mere 20 feet away, but it felt like a mile. My car was in there, a potential sanctuary, but the keys were on the hook in the kitchen. The same kitchen where, just 3 hours ago, I thought we were having a nice family dinner. How had it come to this? It had started with something so trivial. Over a dessert of store-bought apple pie, I'd made an offhand comment. The electric bill seemed a bit high this month. Maybe we could lower the thermostat a degree or 2 at night. Save a little money. Innocuous. Helpful even. Or so I'd thought. Stephanie, my daughter-in-law, had put down her fork with a sharp clink. Her smile was a brittle, fragile thing. We're perfectly capable of managing our own utility bills, Margaret. I know you are, Stephanie, I'd said, keeping my voice level, my principal voice that had calmed 1,000 storms. I was just trying to be helpful. Every little bit counts, right? Helpful. Her voice took on that sharp, acidic edge I'd grown to recognize over the past 8 months. You've been here 8 months, criticizing everything we do. The way we load the dishwasher, how we discipline Emma, how much we spend on groceries. It's constant. I looked at Jacob, my only child. He was studying his plate, as if the crumbs held the secrets to the universe. Jacob, I prompted, a silent plea for support. He finally looked up, but not at me. He looked at his wife, his face a mask of weary resignation. Mom, you have to understand, this is Stephanie's house. Our house. You're a guest. A guest. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. A guest who paid 1/3 of the mortgage. A guest who bought most of the groceries. A guest who handled the bulk of the cleaning because Stephanie's part-time job at the boutique left her too drained. A guest who helped my 11-year-old granddaughter, Emma, with her homework every night and cooked dinner 4 times a week. I understand completely, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I stood, gathering the plates with a hand that trembled only slightly. I'll start looking for my own place tomorrow. That's when Jacob exploded. With what money, Mom? He'd snapped, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood as he stood. You're living here because you can't afford anywhere else. Dad got the better lawyer, remember? You said so yourself. The cruelty in his voice stopped me cold. He was throwing my financial devastation in my face, the devastation that had come from a 28-year marriage dissolving when I found my ex-husband, Richard, in our bed with his 20-something secretary. The devastation that was partly mitigated by the $20,000 down payment gift I'd given them for this very house. I have options, I said, the words feeling hollow. Stephanie let out a short, ugly laugh. Like what? You're 58, divorced, and worked in public education your whole life. You have no savings, no real job prospects, and no husband to take care of you anymore. The vulnerability slipped out before I could cage it. I have you. The silence that followed was heavier than any snowfall. I saw the flicker in Jacob's eyes, not of compassion, but of burden. We never asked you to depend on us, Mom, he said, his voice low and cold. We were helping you out, but we have our own lives to live. Emma's getting older and needs her own space. Stephanie wants to start her family business from the house. There just isn't room for everyone. So what are you saying? I asked, though I already knew. I'm saying maybe it's time to consider other options. There are some really nice assisted living places around here. You'd have your own space, activities with people your own age. Assisted living. For a perfectly healthy woman. My cheeks burned with a mixture of fury and humiliation. I'm not ready for assisted living, Jacob. Well, you can't stay here forever, he shouted. Forever. The dam of my composure broke. I've been here 8 months. I've contributed more to this household than your wife does. Stephanie's face went bone white. Excuse me. You heard me, I said, my own voice rising. I pay for 1/3 of everything. I do most of the cleaning. I help with Emma, I cook. What exactly do you contribute besides complaints and credit card bills? That was the spark that lit the inferno. Jacob started yelling about disrespect and boundaries. Stephanie was crying theatrical tears about how I'd made her feel unwelcome in her own home, and the whole miserable scene spiraled into a screaming match. The next thing I knew, Jacob had grabbed my upper arm, his grip painfully tight, and was marching me toward the front door. You need to cool off outside for a few minutes, he growled, his face a twisted mask I barely recognized. Think about how you want to handle this. Jacob, it's snowing. I'm in my nightgown. Then maybe you'll think faster. The door slammed. The lock turned. And there I was. Now, standing on the porch with my body going numb, the reality of my situation was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I banged on the door again, my fists making dull, impotent thuds. Jacob, please. My voice was a ragged sob, stolen by the wind. There was no response. They had abandoned me. I was starting to genuinely fear hypothermia. My thoughts were becoming sluggish. I needed to move, to find shelter. Maybe I could break a window. The thought was ludicrous. I looked around, my vision blurring with cold and tears, and that's when I saw her. A figure was hurrying across the snowy lawn from the house next door. A heavy coat, sturdy boots, a knit hat pulled over gray hair. Mrs. Patterson. Helen. Margaret. Her voice was incredulous, cutting through the silent, snowy night. Oh my goodness, what are you doing out there? She was at the foot of the porch steps, her face a mixture of shock and concern. The humiliation was a fresh wave of cold. How much had she heard? We're having a disagreement. I managed, my teeth chattering so hard I could barely form the words. In a nightgown? In February. She was already climbing the steps, her arm going around my shaking shoulders. Come on. You're coming to my house right now, before you get frostbite. Helen, I can't impose. Nonsense. My brother's visiting for the week anyway. There's plenty of room. Now come on. She was a force of nature, herding me down the steps and across the 2 yards. I stumbled in the deepening snow, but her grip was firm. As we reached her welcoming, lit porch, she paused and looked back at Jacob's dark house, her expression hardening. Margaret, she said, her voice low and serious. There's something you should know about your son's job situation. I stopped, shivering uncontrollably. What do you mean? She opened her door, ushering me into a blast of blessed, life-giving warmth. My brother is his boss. The world tilted. What? My brother, Peter, runs the marketing division at Hartwell Industries. He's been Jacob's supervisor for the past 1.5 years. My mind, sluggish from the cold, began to race. Hartwell Industries, Jacob's employer. If Helen's brother was his boss. She guided me into her living room, a cozy space filled with overstuffed furniture, family photographs, and the glorious, crackling warmth of a fireplace. Sit, she commanded, pulling a thick, terry cloth robe from a hall closet, her late husband's, she mentioned, and a pair of thick wool socks. I sank onto the sofa, wrapping the robe around me, the fabric feeling like a cocoon of safety. Helen disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a steaming mug of hot chocolate, the real kind, with melted marshmallows on top. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. As I wrapped my hands around the mug, feeling the heat seep back into my frozen bones, the sheer, breathtaking normalcy of the gesture made me want to weep. Meanwhile, my son was probably sleeping soundly, unconcerned with whether I was alive or dead. "Peter's upstairs on a work call, but he'll be down soon," Helen said, settling into an armchair across from me. She studied me for a long moment. "Margaret, I have to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." I nodded, though a sense of dread was beginning to pool in my stomach, colder than the winter outside. "How much do you know about Jacob's job performance lately?" The question was so unexpected it took me a moment to process. I know he's been stressed, working longer hours. He mentioned a big project. Her expression was carefully neutral. "What else has he told you?" "Not much. He never talks about work in detail. When I ask, he just says it was fine or busy." I leaned forward, the mug warm in my hands. "Helen, what aren't you telling me?" Before she could answer, heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs. A man appeared in the doorway, tall and lean with a head of distinguished silver hair and an air of quiet authority. This was clearly Helen's brother. "You must be Margaret," he said, his voice a calm, measured baritone. He extended a hand. "I'm Peter Patterson. Helen told me what happened tonight. I'm glad she brought you in from the cold." "Thank you," I said, my voice still shaky. "For your hospitality. I'll find somewhere else to go tomorrow." Peter and Helen exchanged a look I couldn't quite decipher. "Margaret," Peter said, sitting on the edge of the coffee table, so he was facing me directly. "I need to tell you something about your son, and I need you to promise you'll hear me out before you react." My stomach clenched into a hard, cold ball. "Is Jacob in trouble at work?" "Jacob has been on a performance improvement plan for the past 6 months," Peter said gently. "It's a formal warning. His work quality has declined significantly. Missed deadlines, complaints from colleagues about his attitude. Last month, he had a verbal altercation with a co-worker that required HR intervention." The words landed like successive blows. The picture he was painting was of a man I didn't know. My Jacob was conscientious, hardworking. "There's more," Peter continued, his gaze steady and sympathetic. 3 weeks ago, Jacob came to my office asking for a temporary advance on his salary. He said he needed $5,000 to cover unexpected medical expenses for you." The floor seemed to drop away. "Medical expenses? For me?" "He said you'd been having heart problems, needed surgery, that your insurance wouldn't cover all the costs." He was very convincing. Spoke about being worried about his mother's health. I felt sick. "Peter, I haven't had any heart problems. I haven't been to the doctor for anything more serious than a checkup in over a year." Helen leaned forward. "Margaret, did Jacob ever give you $5,000 for medical expenses?" "No. God, no." The implications crashed over me. "He lied to you. He stole money." Peter nodded grimly. "I approved the advance because I believed him. It was supposed to be deducted from his paychecks over 6 months. Was supposed to be. He's been pushing back on the deductions, claiming the amount is putting too much financial strain on your household. He asked to extend the repayment to 2 years. The room spun. He had stolen $5,000 by lying about my health and was now trying to wriggle out of paying it back, all while literally throwing me out for suggesting we save $20 on the electric bill. "Peter," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "what happens if an employee defaults on a salary advance obtained through false pretenses?" His expression was grave. "It becomes grounds for immediate termination. And given the amount and the deception, the company has the right to pursue legal action." $5,000 definitely qualifies as substantial. I sat back against the sofa cushions, the warmth of the room doing nothing to thaw the ice forming around my heart. My son was not just in trouble, he was facing professional ruin and potential criminal charges. No wonder he'd been so stressed. No wonder he was so desperate to cut expenses, to get me out. "Margaret," Helen said softly, "there's something else. Last week, I saw Stephanie at the boutique. She was showing her coworkers pictures of vacation resorts in Hawaii, talking about booking a 2-week trip for March. First-class flights, a luxury resort. The hypocrisy was so breathtaking it stole the air from my lungs. A Hawaiian vacation, while Jacob was crying poverty to his boss and to me. Peter cleared his throat. "Margaret, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Do you have any documentation that proves you haven't had these medical expenses? Insurance statements, anything?" I thought, my mind racing through the files in the guest room. "Yes, I have my insurance EOBs from the past year. They only show routine checkups, and my blood pressure prescription. That would be a start, Peter said. The thing is, if Jacob lied about the medical emergency, this isn't just a personnel matter anymore. It's potentially criminal fraud. The word fraud hung in the air between us, ugly and final. What are you suggesting? I asked. I'm suggesting, Peter said carefully, that you might have more power in this situation than you realize. Jacob's job, his financial stability, his ability to make his mortgage payments, all of it hinges on whether I choose to push forward with termination and legal action, or whether I find a reason to give him another chance. I stared at him, understanding dawning slowly, a tiny, warm ember in the frozen wasteland of my despair. You're saying I have leverage. I'm saying that tomorrow morning, when Jacob realizes his mother spent the night at his boss's house, he might be very interested in having a different conversation about respect and living arrangements. A slow, grim smile spread across Helen's face. Sometimes justice comes in the form of a snowstorm and a well-timed revelation. I picked up my hot chocolate, the warmth spreading through me, now having nothing to do with the temperature of the drink. My son had thrown me out into the cold, literally and figuratively. But by morning, he was going to discover he'd made a very, very expensive mistake. Peter, I said, my voice steady for the first time all night. What time do you usually get to work? 8:30. Why? I think Jacob and I need to have a conversation first thing in the morning. And I think it would be very helpful if he knew exactly who he was dealing with. Outside, the snow was still falling, a relentless white curtain. But I wasn't worried about being cold anymore. In fact, I was starting to think Jacob was the one who should be worried about freezing. After all, revenge is a dish best served cold. And Minnesota in February was about as cold as it gets. I woke at 6 a.m. in Helen's guest room to the sound of frantic knocking. Not on her door, but next door. Through the frost-round window, I saw a figure in pajamas and a coat, shivering on Jacob's front porch. It was Jacob himself, locked out. The poetic justice was so perfect it was almost comical. Stephanie must have been in the shower. Helen appeared in my doorway with a cup of coffee. Karma works fast around here, she murmured. Should I feel guilty for enjoying this so much? I asked. Honey, after what that boy put you through, enjoy every second. Downstairs, Peter was already dressed for work, his laptop open at the kitchen table. Margaret, he said as I joined him, before we do anything, I want to make sure you understand your options. I sat, wrapping my hands around the coffee mug. I'm listening. Option 1. You go back over there, apologize for whatever they think you did wrong, and continue living under their conditions. You'll be walking on eggshells, but you'll have a roof. The thought made me nauseous. Option 2. Option 2. We use the information we have. Jacob learns that actions have consequences, and you negotiate from a position of strength. And option 3? Option 3. I handle this as a straightforward employment issue. I terminate Jacob for fraud and pursue legal action. You find your own housing, but Jacob faces the full consequences without any family considerations. I looked out the window. Jacob had finally gotten back inside, probably through the garage. I imagined the scene. Stephanie scolding, his excuses. The symmetry was perfect. What would you do if I were your mother? I asked Peter. He didn't hesitate. Option 2. But I'd be strategic. Don't go over there angry. Go over there calm and in control. Let Jacob dig himself deeper before you reveal what you know. So I act contrite. See what they reveal when they think they have all the power. Exactly. Meanwhile, I can investigate further at work. We need to know exactly how much trouble Jacob is really in. My phone buzzed. A text from Jacob. Mom, where are you? Your car is still here. Did you go for a walk? I showed it to Peter and Helen. Helen snorted. He locks you out for hours, and now he's worried about a walk. What should I tell him? Tell him you're fine and you'll be home soon, Peter advised. Don't mention where you are. Let him wonder. I typed the message. The response was immediate. Mom, I'm really sorry about last night. I lost my temper. Stephanie and I both feel terrible. Can we start over? Maybe figure out a better arrangement. A better arrangement, I read aloud. That's an interesting choice of words. Peter was typing on his laptop. Margaret, I'm pulling up Jacob's file. I want you to see this before you go over there. He turned the screen toward me. The record was worse than he'd let on. A steady decline from exceeds expectations to needs improvement. Multiple written warnings for tardiness, missed deadlines, and interpersonal conflicts. There was a specific complaint from a female coworker about inappropriate comments. This is worse than you said, I whispered. I was trying to be diplomatic. The truth is, Jacob was already on thin ice. The fraud just accelerated things. He scrolled down. I'd already scheduled a meeting with HR to discuss termination next week. My phone buzzed again. Mom, please come home. Stephanie made your favorite breakfast. We really want to work this out. Your favorite breakfast? Helen raised an eyebrow. I don't have a favorite breakfast that Stephanie knows how to make. Margaret, Peter said, closing his laptop, when you go over there, pay attention. Listen to how they talk about money. Notice how they treat you when they think they need something versus how they treated you last night. And see if you can find out about this Hawaii vacation. I stood and looked out at their house. Their kitchen lights were on. They were preparing their strategy. Helen, can I borrow some clothes? I want to look put together. Of course. What's your plan? I'm going to be the sweet, apologetic mother they expect. I'm going to listen to their generous offer. And I'm going to let them hang themselves with their own rope. Peter grinned. I like your thinking. He reached into his pocket and handed me a business card. Take this. Don't show it to them, but keep it. A reminder that you're not powerless. What time is your meeting with Jacob about the advance? I haven't scheduled it yet. I was waiting to see how this morning plays out. Perfect. Give me 2 hours. I went upstairs to get dressed, a strange, cold calm settling over me. Jacob and Stephanie thought they had played their trump card. Instead, they had handed me the entire deck. I knocked on my son's front door at 8:15, wearing Helen's simple but elegant navy blue dress. Jacob opened it immediately, his face a mask of relief and anxiety. Mom! Thank God. We were so worried. He pulled me into a hug that felt desperate, not affectionate. I found somewhere warm to stay, I said simply, stepping inside. The performance had begun. The dining table was set with their good china. Stephanie emerged from the kitchen, her smile radiant and utterly false. Margaret! We're so glad you're okay. I made pancakes and bacon. Your favorite. They weren't, but I smiled graciously. That's very thoughtful, Stephanie. We sat. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Mom, Jacob began. We stayed up most of the night talking. We handled everything wrong. I took a sip of orange juice. We've all been under stress. That's just it, Stephanie jumped in. Jacob's been working so hard, taking on extra projects, positioning himself for a promotion. The stress has been immense. A promotion. The lie was so smooth, so brazen. That sounds promising, I said, layering concern and pride into my voice. It is, Jacob said, his smile tight. Department supervisor. Significant salary increase. More security. The lies kept coming. He wasn't up for a promotion. He was up for termination. He wasn't taking on extra projects. He was failing at his basic duties. We wanted to talk about your living situation, Stephanie said, her voice dripping with false warmth. We've been researching some beautiful senior living communities. Places with activities, social opportunities, complete independence, but with support. They sound expensive, I said carefully. They can be, Jacob admitted. Around $3,000 a month. But we'd help with the costs, especially once my promotion goes through. $3,000, while planning a Hawaiian vacation, while he owed $5,000 in stolen funds. That's very generous, I said. But I'd want to contribute. I couldn't let you carry that burden. Mom, you don't have much in savings, Stephanie said, her tone gently condescending. I might have more resources than you realize, I said vaguely. I've been looking into benefits for women over 55. Housing assistance, that sort of thing. I could see the calculation in their eyes. They were like predators catching a new scent. That's great, Jacob said, visibly relieved. If you could get some assistance, it would make the transition easier. Speaking of transitions, I said, when were you thinking? They exchanged a glance. We were thinking by the end of the month, Stephanie said brightly. Give you time to get settled before spring. 2 weeks. They weren't just eager, they were desperate. I finished my breakfast, playing my part to perfection. I was the grateful, slightly confused mother, trusting in her family's benevolence. As I excused myself to make some time-sensitive calls about benefits, I felt Peter's business card in my pocket like a talisman. Upstairs in the guest room, I called him. It's even better than we hoped, I whispered. They want me out in 2 weeks. They've already been looking at places. And Jacob just told me he's being promoted to department supervisor. Peter's laugh was sharp. Margaret, I'm looking at a termination letter. His performance review is this afternoon. It's not going to be pleasant. They're planning something, Peter. This isn't spontaneous. Try something, he said. Tell them you need documentation of your current living expenses for a housing application. Mortgage, utilities, food. See if they'll admit on paper how much you've been contributing. I understood. If Jacob was receiving significant support from me while claiming hardship at work, it painted a picture of systemic dishonesty. "There's something else," I said. "I think I'll have them take me to look at facilities today. See how eager they are." "Good." I'm moving Jacob's review to 11 a.m. I want to confront him about the fraud before he has time to prepare. I looked at my watch. 9:15. In less than 2 hours, Jacob's carefully constructed house of lies would come crashing down. And he would have no idea that the demolition had been planned from his boss's sister's house by his own mother. At exactly 11 a.m., we were standing in the overly bright lobby of Sunset Manor. I was admiring the craft room with the facility director when Jacob's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID, and his face lost all its color. "It's my boss," he muttered. "I have to take this." He hurried outside. Through the large window, I watched his world disintegrate in real time. His shoulders slumped. His hand went to his forehead. When he returned, he looked like a ghost. "I have to go into work. Emergency meeting." The drive home was silent and tense. When we pulled in, Jacob rushed inside to change into a suit, and Stephanie turned to me, her desperation palpable. "What did you think of Sunset Manor?" she asked, as if her husband wasn't potentially facing ruin. "Lovely," I said. "I'd like to see a few more." "We can do that," she said too eagerly. Back inside, I retreated to the guest room and called Helen. He just left. He looked terrified. Peter called. Jacob confessed to everything. The fraud, using company resources to plan his vacation. He broke down completely. My heart hammered against my ribs. What happens now? Peter gave him 2 options: immediate termination and legal action, or resignation with a neutral reference and a repayment plan. He has until 5 o'clock to decide. I looked at my watch. 2:15. The trap was closing. "Helen, does Stephanie know?" "Not unless Jacob called her from the office. She's downstairs probably planning your move while her husband is choosing between jail and unemployment." I hung up, a cold certainty settling in me. I went downstairs for a strained lunch of canned tomato soup, your favorite, and gently probed Stephanie about their finances and the Hawaii trip. Her lies were flimsy, desperate things. She claimed they'd saved for months, that Jacob had gotten a great deal through work. When I mentioned I needed documentation of my living expenses for a housing application, she grew evasive. When I asked if Jacob was worried about his job, she became defensive. His job is secure. The promotion is practically guaranteed. The performance was tragic. She was a woman clinging to the edge of a cliff, refusing to look down. Jacob didn't come home at 5, or 6, or 7. By 8, Stephanie was a nervous wreck, pacing and calling his repeatedly unanswered phone. At 8:30, car door slammed. She rushed to the window. "He's not alone." I joined her. Jacob was walking up the drive with another man, tall, authoritative. Mr. Richardson, from legal. The conversation that followed in their living room was a masterpiece of devastation. Jacob, gray-faced, confessed everything: the resignation, the fraud, the lost insurance. Stephanie's face was a canvas of shock, then horror, then utter despair. When Mr. Richardson mentioned the $5,000, her eyes flicked to me, wide with panic. "Where did that money go?" I asked quietly. "Living expenses, the mortgage," Jacob mumbled. "The Hawaii trip," Stephanie whispered, the truth dawning. "We can cancel. The deposits are non-refundable," she moaned. $3,000. As Mr. Richardson laid out the repayment terms, 30 days to begin or face prosecution, the full weight of their predicament crushed them. When Stephanie fled to the backyard, sobbing, Jacob slumped in his chair, a broken man. "Mom, I'm sorry." "Jacob," I said, my voice cold and clear, "when you locked me out, were you planning to use it as justification to put me in a home? To make me seem incompetent?" His silence was my answer. "I see." I stood, picking up my purse. "I'm going to stay with a friend tonight. We can talk about what kind of relationship we'll have going forward when you've had time to think." "Mom, where are you going?" "Which friend?" I paused at the doorway, looking at my son, who had valued appearances over integrity and convenience over family. Someone who doesn't lock family out in snowstorms and then lie about their health to steal money. I left him there, in the expensive house he could no longer afford, and walked back across the lawn to Helen's. The snow had stopped. The world was quiet and clean. For the first time in months, I was free. The next morning, a frantic Stephanie appeared on Helen's doorstep, begging for my help. The performance was over. Now came the negotiation. I laid out my terms. Jacob gets any job immediately. They sell the expensive car. Emma goes to public school. And if I were to help them, I would be an equal partner in financial decisions, and Jacob would go to therapy. They agreed to everything. But I didn't move back in. Instead, I used my savings and divorce settlement to buy a small, sunny condo of my own. I found a life, volunteering, a book club, friends. Jacob, humbled, took a job at a hardware store and discovered he was good at it, and honest work brought him a peace that scheming never had. Stephanie learned to budget. Emma thrived in public school. 6 months later, I made coffee in my own kitchen in my own home. The photograph from Helen of the three of us, the unlikely family forged in a snowstorm, sat on my counter. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma asking to bake cookies. Another from Jacob, offering to help with any repairs. I was no longer a guest, a burden, or a financial tool. I was Grandma Margaret, strong, independent, and loved because I chose to be in their lives, not because I had nowhere else to go. The snow had melted months ago, but the lessons of that cold night remained. Sometimes, you have to be willing to stand alone in the cold before you can find your way to real warmth. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so good that you're grateful to the people who forced you to find your own strength.